What's up, my man?
Bhrett, my man, boy, you guys surprised me with that video. So quick backstory. I played at Cal State Northridge, and Paul Tremlin, who did that video, also played at Cal State Northridge about 20 years later, and he got heavy into audio, video, telling stories.
Hmm.
And he came out one day because he moved back to, I think he's in Missouri, and he came out and he started doing some shorts, and came out to my place in Santa Monica, and we spent, half a day. And it's not just about me. It just how he wove that together. I just think he's got such a talent. So anyway, I happen to love that little beautiful 5-minute short called The Art of Quiet. So thank you for putting that out there. It really,
absolutely. Make sure you check it out. The Art of Quiet on YouTube. Look, when I know somebody and I'm excited to have you on, to me, it's cool to kind of find something obscure. And I know that people always hit us up and be like, oh, that's copyright. Like, look, we're just sharing stuff. Okay. And what are we sharing? We're sharing aspects of human performance. You've been in this a long time. I mean, Alan is, give you a little bit of this bio here. I'll pull it up here and I'll read it to you just so you guys understand. So let me just say this, the off the cuff one. If you want to be a thrower and throw better, Alan's one of those dudes. Okay. But that's the baseball world. If you're a golfer or anything like that, Alan is he's a trainer, consultant. He's worked with Cy Young Award winners. He's worked with the best on helping people focus when it matters the most. And the way that they do that is through mindfulness and meditation. And he asked me a question years ago that I've always held on to. He said, hey, Bhrett, if you could have gone out and pitched and what did you want? What did you want to be in your disposal? I was like, well, I wanted to feel comfortable. I wanted to feel aggressive. I wanted to be able to attack. He's like, well, what would have kept you from doing that? Just the drama outside of you. Right? When you buy into that BS, what happens is you lose your place in where your competitive angst. And so I've always remembered that. I thought that was cool. So can you dive into that a little bit and kind of talk about how meditation helps players, whatever sport you're in? Because I get this question all the time, meditation. I use it, I just don't teach it.
Yeah, look, I mean, real quickly, what you were talking about is what we all talk about in the mental game is the process. And it took me 20 something years to get to this point where the last 7 or 8 years, this is kind of all I've been talking about is, before we get to the meditation piece briefly, is, if you pick 3 things that you said would lead to the best execution of the pitch of your life or shot of your life, what are those 3 things? And so as an example for me as a pitcher, it would be my breathing, my focal point, and attacking my focal point. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that it's those 3 constants versus the trillion other potential interchangeable variables. Mm-hmm. So briefly on the process, even though I really, really, of course, want to get to meditation, is that's what you were talking about, of course. And it just could be so helpful for someone to have a revelation and realize I can control 3 things that I'm agreeing lead to the best execution of my life.
It doesn't matter what's happening around you. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can always re-anchor back into those, right?
You could be in China, you could be in Texas. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be playing in a 7th game of the World Series. You could be in the backyard with your nephew. At the end of the day, for me, I've learned that if I take a good breath, if I have a focal point, which is intention, and if I attack my focal point, which is conviction or commitment, that's it. That's my Bruce Lee 10th degree black belt, if you will. Now I know I've got to just be Bruce Lee 10th degree black belt. If I leave that, I'm not a bad guy. I've just entered the world, to use your word, of drama or distraction.
That's your word. I stole that from you.
Well, I'm re-stealing it back.
Okay.
Meditation, just so we can get to some other things. Like the short of it is this, Bhrett, and I know I'm saying things that you already know and buy into.
Yeah, but our audience, and this is the cool thing, is I'm bringing you to the golf world. Yeah. A lot of my followers are golfers, and they're trying to play better in their own game. Their minds are swimming with content, technical stuff, and overcoached in technical areas. And I love coaches. This is not a knock at coaches. It's just that they're all like, if I could just do this better, if I could just do that better, then I'll play better. And they're ignoring the competitive side of the psyche. And that's what I want you to kind of, that's why I think meditation can play a role.
Well, what I would say is I usually incorporate these 5 words at some point in any talk or discussion. And I get these from Dr. Shauna Shapiro, who's one of the leaders in the world in mindfulness. And I've done a number of retreats with her, and she's amazing. And the 5 words are, you become what you practice. And if you want to have a better swing or you want to be better at chipping your sand game or your 4-foot putts versus your 17, you're lagging. What do you do? Well, of course, you do a ton of practicing, and so that's a given. And I think what people don't really understand or don't understand as well is that the mental game is a practice. We can sit there all day long and say, stay in the moment and, finish to your target. And that can be helpful, as we just talked about. But if you don't have, in my opinion, let's call it a formal practice, just like the physical practice, then I just think it's like percentages. It's like math, right? It's like, do I want to be quieter and more relaxed and more clear-minded on the golf course? Do I want to be in the present moment more often? Well, those are skills. So if you can look at skill development mentally and look at it that way instead of the mental game, which might be too ambiguous for people, all of a sudden it's more tangible. They're like, okay, yes, if I was more relaxed, I'd play better. Yes, if my mind was clear, I'd play better. Yes, if I stayed in the moment better, I'd play better. Yes, if I wasn't caught up with whether it's a bogey putt or a birdie putt, I'd play better. Well, mental practice in a nutshell is sequestering yourself, is putting yourself aside for the sole intention of being present so that you can start to listen or observe what your mind is saying. The same stuff that might happen between the third and fourth hole or the first and second shot of a hole. And now all of a sudden what you're doing is you're bringing awareness, which is a word I talk about all the time. If you can meditate each day or do a mindfulness practice each day, even if it's just 5 minutes, and you say, okay, for 5 minutes, I'm going to practice watching my thoughts, but listen to this line. But I'm not going to take the dance with my thoughts. I'm going to be what's called neutral. They can come up, they could be negative, they could be positive, whatever comes up in my mind, I'm going to practice being the observer or the quiet space. It's also called the silent witness of my thoughts. And how that translates is that if you have a practice doing that every day, maybe twice a day, and all of a sudden you start stepping back from your thoughts and you maybe don't take your thoughts so personally, and all of a sudden now the silence behind the thoughts is where you want to be. Hence, quiet mind equals best game ever is a tweet that we put up there all the time. So just to bring this back and to move on is establish a practice every day. So all of a sudden you can build and develop skills mentally that are going to enhance your performance and ultimately enhance life.
All right, so let's talk about that, because what I love what you're talking about is, players, one thing I hear them is like, when I play great, I'm not thinking about anything. And I'm like, sometimes you have to think about something to get into synchronicity, is kind of what I call it, to get in the slot, right? It's hard to have an absent mind unless you're a monk in the Tibetan mountains and you're out there for 35 years. I want people to understand that. But what Alan's talking about is when the mind gets aligned and is non-conflict. And when we start adding conflict is when we start judging, we start adding drama to it, we start making judgmental comments about ourselves because of it, instead of, hey, I got pretty shitty thinking going on right now. That's okay. Like you can just be honest. And I tell players all the time, just be an active tourist. Be in Rome and just observe what's going on without having, and document it. Document it. Like be aware of it. Like what's going on versus, oh my God, what's going on? Like, hey, what's going on? Because you can turn the station, you can turn the channel and dial that in. For those of you who are so young, you don't remember cars. You had to dial in that, that to get that static out, right? Right. So let's talk about that practice. What is a recommendation? Because you and I had a great interchange about a year ago. I said, when I pitched, I did meditation and yeah, somebody just asked a question. This is all uploaded. It'll be on our archive. It'll be there for eternity. I would visualize, and I would be what Coach Bertman used to say: be the star of your own movie, but also work through the drama that you're going through. Yeah. And so I would do that 5 or 10 minutes a day. And now what I do is I like to get to my desk in the morning and I like to immerse myself in the things that I dread, which is the unknown. The unknown of the morning creates the most anxiety for me. And I love to sit there and be immersed in it versus judging it and fighting it. I get there, I drink my coffee, I read today's equivalent of the news, Twitter, Wall Street Journal, whatever, and I just immerse myself in it. And that's my practice. So what are some of the practices that people could utilize and impart in their own game?
I'd say right away, well, number one, be consistent. You don't go to the gym once a week and then say you're good. If you're going to do this, and I hope and pray everybody gives this a try, because if you do this for a few days, you may never leave it for the rest of your life. That's how powerful and profound just a few minutes of meditation can do for someone's life. So give it a chance, but let's just take 5 minutes to make it super simple.
Perfect.
Find a place, turn off all electronics, right? Create a situation where hopefully you're not going to be distracted, and here's a very simple breathing exercise. And the reason the breath, as you know, is so valuable is because, one, the breath is always happening in the present moment. It's a great thing to be aware of. Two, the breath we associate with being very calming and relaxing and cleansing, including cleansing our brain. And three, the breath is not a thought, it's an instinct. And so these are all really good reasons to connect with the breath, on top of the fact of the other reasons. So here's a simple exercise. You literally wait for your inhale to come. And I love what you said earlier. You're a tourist, right? You're not forcing the breath. Just your breath is keeping you alive.
This is big. This is big, guys. Don't force the inhale. Allow it to come as part of your instinct.
Just
I
let
see
it.
so many people are like, and they haven't ever exhaled.
And the other reason, Bhrett, it's so big is because part of meditation, you're gaining so many skills you don't even realize. For instance, one great skill of allowing your breath to come at its own pace is patience, is trust. Like, these are very, very powerful metaphoric things happening, right? Just waiting and trusting your breath to come when it's ready, patience. So let the inhale come at its own accord. It's going to come because it keeps you, it's going 24 hours a day for you anyway. And when you feel that inhale, I like more visuals than more linear stuff, but whatever is comfortable for somebody. But you can literally visualize like a chalkboard, like a white chalk on a black backwards. You have that beautiful contrast. You could visualize your whole body as a number one, whatever works for you. I like going into black holes and just being in silence and just feeling this, white oneness would be something I would probably want to play with. The exhale then is a 2, and let that come on its own accord. The next inhale is a 3, and the next exhale is a 4. So you're just counting your breath. If you count to maybe 20 or even 30, it'll probably take you about 5 minutes if you're patient and you let the breath dictate the pace. Now, I have to say, one other thing that's very important, one of the single most important tools, not only for meditation, but I actually believe for life, is this principle called neutrality. And I know you know where I'm going. And so the beauty of this exercise is, yes, you want to stay focused on the exercise, but what if a thought comes in and says, I'm really hungry, or why am I doing this? Or you start thinking about something from the past that's concerning you. The second you hear a thought, well, first of all, you have the breath and the counting to go to as your default. But here's a great concept, which is, it's called be neutral. So if a thought comes up, it's not right or wrong or good or bad. Just let it be, and then redirect your attention, which is something you also mentioned earlier, back to the counting. So in a nutshell, inhale 1, exhale 2, inhale 3, exhale 4. Any thoughts come in, be neutral, let them be there, and just keep redirecting your attention back to the counting.
Why this is so important, that people say, I tried that stuff on the golf course. I tried that stuff in a game. Can you imagine a soldier going to war and never having shot their gun? That's what this is the equivalent of. And it changed my life pitching at LSU. And it gave me a way to visualize, because I remember coach used to lay us all down and visualize and gyms and everything. And we'd all be like, fall asleep as soon as we could. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. Like, I saw that. Like, I freaking saw that. And all of a sudden you're like, I've got a tool here that helps me manage. And for golfers, we try to, for so long, the game has been sold as this calming experience that it's actually chaotic. But you are the calming force. It's not necessarily that you have to be calm. It's the fact that you trust and believe the tools that you have in that moment. Because when you take that deep breath and all right, I can accept where I'm at. I don't have to judge it. I don't have to be angry with it, but I can recenter, refocus it. Man, now we're cooking with some gas, because that we fight and we resist so much. And that neutrality is critical for people out there. How can coaches implement this? Because I know there's some videos of people that you've impacted that have a bunch of people laying down in outfield grasses before practice, going through that stuff. And tell me how would you, if you were a coach, how would you implement this?
Number one, make it a priority. I think
there it is. Say it louder from the back. Coaches, you can't do this and hand them a brochure and expect the mental game to be fixed. Can't do this. Make it a priority.
If there's buy-in from the head coach, the kids are going to buy in. I've been saying this word a lot lately, which I love. The kids are starving, and I say borderline desperate for any kind of mental nourishment, spiritual nourishment, quiet time, relaxation. This generation, between COVID and technology and social media, never before, if you go back 200 years, never before, based on the rhythms of life, have we taken on so many things. And so I would just say, as a coach, I try not to guilt coaches into doing it, but I'm like, look, if you have your kids for 2 or 3 hours a day, and if you knew the greatest impact you're going to have on their lives is going to be 10 or 15 minutes of breathing and relaxation and meditation, and we have so much information on YouTube that's free on how to take your players through a meditation. So at first it could be intimidating. At first it could be a little bit like, how do I do this? But we've broken it down. I've done a couple of podcasts with Jeremy Sheetinger, who's the head coach at Georgia Gwinnett College, and he's just one of the brightest minds and huge. They meditate every single day for 20 minutes. His second year at that program, they won the national championship. It's a way of life. And so I would just say, as a coach, instead of thinking like, I'm not sure how to do this, or I would say, look at it the opposite way. Like, I want to do this because it's the biggest piece that I can give to the kids. And the other thing is a lot of times coaches worry that the kids may not buy in. I've been doing this for 33 years. I can tell you the last 3 to 7 years, and I know you know this as well, these kids are starving. They love it. When I've had so many coaches do this, when they lay the kids down and they're a little bit worried about what the kids are going to think, they're blown away on how pumped the kids are. And they're like, Coach, can we do this again tomorrow? And because I'll end on this point. Intuitively, as creatures, we know we're desperate for this quiet time. We're desperate for some relaxation. We're desperate to learn how to be quieter in our minds. So if you lead someone to that, the effect is going to be way more visceral and dramatic than I think people understand.
You've crushed it on this point. The things to think about, y'all. Our generation is the most anxious we've ever seen on record. Okay, anxiety's through the roof, perfectionism through the roof. This is a critical element that people need to learn, and it doesn't have to be a 45-minute transcendental meditation process.
No.
Okay, the simple breathing can allow them to connect to the present moment. It's the only thing that's truly automatic in our life that recenters us. And it's, I always tell people, if you're going to hyperventilate, the first thing the body does after it hits the ground is it starts breathing right again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's funny how that works. Okay. And I don't want you to hyperventilate. Now, to that point, when you do teach breathing practices, let your teams and let your folks, even you, have a minute or two to kind of reconnect, because something happens. Because most of us are mouth breathers. We're breathing stress, that once we start reconnecting to our breathing, we tend to flood our brain with a lot of oxygen. And so people tend to get a little lightheaded at times. So give them a little chance, okay? But what you're going to hear is people say, God, that was good. Like, okay, what did that cost? 3 minutes? I wish every teacher in America would take 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes after lunch to do this and allow people to breathe and just be where your butt is, be where your feet are, right?
I believe, and I've thought the same thing for probably almost since I started. If kids starting in kindergarten, nursery school, took 5 minutes or 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, and as you said, it would be a great way to close the day down. And even if they don't know what they're doing yet, but they just, as you said, connect with this intuitive, instinctive part of us, I think our world would flip overnight into such a healthier, mentally healthier, physically healthier, emotionally healthier, psychologically, spiritually healthier. And I do feel like it will happen. It might take another 20 years and it might take another 40 years. I hope it happens in the next few years, but I hope it happens tomorrow. But I think we all know that based on the stuff that's going on in this world, that's what now let me use that word, desperate again, or starving.
Yeah.
The kids may not be running up to your room and saying, I'm desperate, coach, to meditate today. But boy, when they get exposed to this, it hits them hard, and it's a life changer. And I think the reason you and I are both so passionate about this, and anybody in the mental training field is so passionate about this, is because we've seen it change people's lives in one session or one conversation. And that's why we love what we do, because we're trying to help people live the best version of themselves possible.
It's funny. One of the things I tell folks, and coaches have to be careful in today's world about this, so I want you to understand, but when I'm with my tour players, I'll say, can I touch you real quick? When I walk up to them, and I'll just make the comment of like, hey, I'm going to touch them on the shoulder while I talk to them, because there's something amazing that happens. And I'm sure you've done this too, is when you touch somebody, and like I said, you have to ask for permission. Okay. So don't just go up and touching people. But what happens is the breathing synchronizes and the heartbeat synchronize.
Interesting.
And when you walk up to them, we're energy folks, right? And so when our energy's high, we don't breathe real deep. And if I'll walk up to a guy and they're practicing or whatever, and I'll put my hand on their shoulder and be like, hey, I don't even have to say anything. And I remember Coach Bertman used to do that. He'd come to the mound and he'd put his hand on your shoulder. And it was such a brilliant connection. Yeah. He shared a study from the NBA years and years ago. Like I said, we can't do it anymore, but coaches that touched their players in huddles had a much higher success and win rate. And I think that's where breathing goes hand in hand. If you're touching them in their lives, okay, you're touching them and teaching them those, we're great. So if there's any questions for Alan, love to hear them. If not, we'll send it to him and go from there. But man, you are the best. Bash, any questions?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's one that came in. How do you beat all the other best players that are practicing meditation and mindfulness, and what separates the greats, if that's even a question that you can answer?
I mean, look, it's sort of like physical training, right? However good you are, you're trying to be the best version of yourself and physically get better. Wherever you're at mentally, you're doing the same thing. So it's always going to come back to, I have a chapter in my book called Mastering Yourself. It's always going to come back to, how great can I be? I just need to be the best version of myself, physically prepared, mentally prepared, emotionally prepared, etc. And so I think that's the easiest way to answer it. I wouldn't really, it's great if they're all doing it too, but I think Bhrett would obviously agree with this, that if you're dealing with any athletes that have achieved any success consistently, generally speaking, they're just so focused on mastering themselves.
Yeah, and being where they are. Look, one of the things that I found, I've suffered from anxiety my entire life. I've had panic attacks. One of the things that I do is I drive with the radio off at times. And I just want to hear the sound of the road, and I just want to be with the road. And, I think that has been something that's really helpful to me. What's the title of your book?
Getting Focused, Staying Focused.
There you go. So make sure you check it out. We'll post a link to our social media. We'll put a link on here so people can buy it. Buddy, love you to death, man. Thank you so much. We're going to make it out to California at some point, come spend some time with you. But you're a legend. You're the best. And yet here you are with bands and throwing programs, but actually impacting the people more in the way that they think and breathe. And I told you the story. One of my teammates came back from the Cape Cod and ended up being one of my roommates. He's like, dude, we met this dude up there that made us breathe and count, and I couldn't get past 2. But this guy, and that was Mike Neal, if you remember Mike Neal, who was a legend. Yeah. And
Mike,
yeah.
I was just gonna say, the cool thing about that is I was like a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I was 28 because it was 1992.
You were the cool coach then.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you were the cool coach. The 28-year-old coach when you're 19. That's the cool dude.
I was out there, and Rich Hill was the head coach, and John Schiffner was the assistant, and Dave Taylor. And what was cool is we made it optional, but I met with all the guys on day one, explained what I was doing. And so we met an hour before the early outs. So that's how early we were there. Yeah. And I had a few guys make every session the whole season, like all 10 weeks. And Mike was one of them, and he loved it. And Ronnie Rance was another guy, I think around the same period, and Harry Barrios. Harry Barrios, right?
Harry Barrios, yeah.
Those were the LSU guys on the team. Mike and I actually stayed in touch a little bit. It's been a while, but no, that was the cool thing is that at the time, 1992, I could feel it. Like no one, I'm not saying no one, but it felt like no one was really talking about meditation. And I felt like this is the engine of the car. Like
It's the cool stuff, man. You
so,
should have come down to Baton Rouge because I think we were doing some things that you would have gotten jazzed about. You would
well,
have loved it.
Jay Johnson,
Oh.
just so you know,
Oh, I know.
Jay is a very dear friend of mine, and I go back to 20 something years with Jay from USD, and
So when I went down and met with him in October, spoke to the team about being an alum, and Jay I told him you and I were buds, and he's like, oh, jeez, I got pressure now, and I'm like, buddy, with that roster, you ain't got pressure. Oh my God, holy cow! I've never seen a roster like that in college baseball. I mean,
Yeah.
Dylan Cruz is the best, maybe the best college player I've ever seen, ever. Sitting 520.
Well, Jay is also, not that Dylan's not a great hitter, but boy,
I
Jay can teach hitting, and
They're they got
but
some
I
more.
appreciate this, man.
Dude,
listen,
make sure you check out Jaeger Sports. Check him out. Alan.
much love. Hey, much love back. Thank you for having me on, man. It's always a treat and an honor.
Well, thank you. And y'all check them out. We're going to talk about that. And next, we're going to talk about how to slow down your mind a little bit, built off of this in the biggest moments after this. Love you, man.